And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Deborah Wold, who's had multiple near-death experiences, which we're going to learn about and more. Deborah, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Thank you, Jeff. Happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. And if you don't mind, Deborah, let's start with your first one that you had when you were 2 years old.
Okay, so I was probably a little two-ish, and happened to be in a pool for what felt like the first time in an apartment complex. I'm pretty sure it was in Fresno. And I was told to just stay on the steps and hold on to the rail. Everybody else is swimming out in the pool. And, I would jump from one step to the second step and back up, one step down, and then down to the third step and jump back up. And all the other kids, of course, were out deeper in the pool. So I gradually got brave enough to jump off the step and get back up and thought, oh, this is fun. And then continued with that and eventually lost the rail. And as I kept trying to jump back to the step, the pool was sloping downwards. And I just started to get deeper and deeper and deeper. And the person who was there to watch me wasn't paying attention or, got distracted. And I got to a point where I realized I wasn't getting back up. And there was no way I could get to the steps anymore. And I could see people in the pool around me. My eyes were open. But the pressure started to kind of come in. And I remember thinking, uh-oh. I don't know that I understood death at that point, but I realized I was not going to be here very much longer. And as a last attempt, cartoons were huge in my life. I remember Bugs Bunny used to get in trouble sometimes in water, and he would jump up and put one finger up and jump up and put two fingers up. And after three fingers, he just would kind of collapse into the water, and then something would happen. Somebody would rescue him. And I thought, well, maybe somebody will save me. And I did that third time, still nobody there. And I remember exhaling, I think what last breath I had. And I started inhaling, and instead of feeling afraid or even the, terror, I felt this odd sense of peace and a sense of calm. And then all of a sudden, I just popped up out of my body, and I was above the pool. And I was about, I would say, somewhere between 30 and then eventually 50 to 60 feet up. I kept rising. And I had this awareness, even at that age, that I was me, and there was a body in the pool, and I knew I was connected to it somehow, but it wasn't actually me. And so I'm kind of floating above, and I can see all the people around the pool, and the person who's supposed to be, paying attention had the back turned to me. And all of a sudden I watch this other man from the deep end of the pool kind of notice that I was now on the bottom. And I remember he had red hair and a beard, and he jumped in. And at that point, it seemed like there was some time that went by, kind of watching as the water, they were trying to resuscitate me. And I can't really tell you how long it was. I mean, it was pretty quick. It wasn't super groovy in terms of near-death experiences, but the takeaway before I ended up back in my body was that I am more than this body. The body itself isn't me, that my awareness was still there. And from that point on, I started having really vivid memories from a very young age. And I would say, there wasn't a whole lot more to that one, except that I do remember coming to on the edge of the pool, coughing up the water and being in a state of, I want to say disassociation and shock, because suddenly I was back in the body and it wasn't very comfortable, and the burning in the nose and all of that. It was just very strange to me, but it clicked on this awareness to start paying attention to things is the best way to put it.
Do you feel that this awareness that you are more than your body stuck with you the rest of your life?
Yeah, absolutely. There have been times where I lost a sense of spirituality and a connectedness to something more than myself, but that there was more to me than what was going on in the body became pretty firmly placed at that point.
All right, let's move forward to your next near death experience.
All right, so I was 4, and I was in the lobby of what was then Pac Bell in San Francisco, and I had a parent working there, and for some reason, I was left alone in the lobby, and I got bored. So, trying to entertain myself, I was looking for something to do, and I found a bunch of paper clips on the floor. So, at that point, I started making like a chain of paper clips, making daisy chains and paper clip chains were cheap entertainment back then. So I created this lovely chain, but it wasn't long enough to make into a necklace. So looking for something to do with it, I look over and I see an outlet on the floor, and genius that I was, I took one and stuck it in and the other, and that just fried me. I mean, my hair, everything went up, but I lost all awareness and consciousness for several minutes. I can't really call it a near death experiences. I just literally got fried. And I kind of came to in an elevator as we were getting up to one of the upper floors. I could smell the burnt skin and the burnt hair. It was very unpleasant. And I was just wowed. And, they were taking me in to deal with the burns on my hands. But that one, I would say, leveled me up in terms of certain abilities and things that I didn't even know were possible or really aware of. But that one started teaching me to notice things, notice patterns. And the takeaway from that was to kind of start trusting my inner guidance. And I feel like it turned on some things that kind of started directing me on a path that continued with some traumatic experiences and things that, again, kind of popped me out of my body. But I wasn't. I wasn't sure why it was happening. I just knew that it was happening. And I became known in my family as a smarty pants and a know it all because I had this relationship now that was ongoing with other energies, is the best way to put it, that I didn't know other people didn't have. I just thought everybody was seeing and feeling and experiencing these things.
Can you give us some examples in the ways you leveled up?
Yeah. I started having lucid dreams. Uh, that was something new. I would have these nightmares about being chased around by these little balls of light. I didn't know what they were, and my thought was they must be fire. And so, the first time I had the dream, I think it just panicked. But then I kept having this recurring dream, and it was in the same setting, and I would see the same room. And what ended up happening is I would pause the dream. I would try to stop it and back it up to the point where I felt safe again and see if there was a different way out of the room without getting chased by them. And then this became a pattern that I continued on through life. Anytime I would have a nightmare or something uncomfortable happen or a dream that went a direction I didn't enjoy, I would almost, it felt like uh, felt like all night. I know it wasn't, but I would just keep backing it up and try to redream a new ending, something that, I could wake up and not feel so much anxiety about. Um, Dreams have become much more prophetic at times, and sometimes I feel like I'm dreaming something that's not from this realm, maybe from another lifetime or from another dimension, still me. And then eventually I started having dreams where I felt like I was witnessing someone else's dream. The best way to kind of explain it would be it's kind of like when I've heard people talk about their shared death experiences. I felt like I was dreaming somebody else's dream or watching it through their eyes.
So when you say you were dreaming someone else's dream, were you seeing people that you knew in your dreams and you felt like you were
No,
in their dream?
no, people I didn't know, but it was more like observing it through their body. Now it's possible that, depending upon where this goes, it could be a simultaneous life experience. I mean, I believe in reincarnation, but I also kind of believe like all these things could be happening at the same time, maybe jumping into not only a different timeline, but a different aspect of me, that my soul may have incarnated in multiple ways. And I'm getting to kind of tap into those experiences because it felt familiar, but not me. Definitely not my life or anybody in it.
Do you think it's possible you were either seeing past life memories or perhaps you are seeing your life in another dimension?
Yes, both actually. Sometimes it felt like it could have been a past life, although the timing of it is sometimes perplexing with that. I I've had certain innate fears that don't really make sense. Nothing that I'd really experienced in this life prior to these things happening. Things around fire, for example, things around certain accidents with machinery, especially cars, not so much planes. But I did actually end up having a dream that felt more like, I guess it could be a past life, but it felt like even possibly a future one, in that I was a pilot in, I want to call it a craft. It wasn't really an airplane, and there was some sort of war going on at the time, and I had to dive underneath like a freeway and hide and cloak myself somehow while these things that were chasing me, these other crafts, kind of were diverted. So, and that was not something I was interested in. It wasn't something I looked at. It was just this really vivid situation. It wasn't a whole thing, but it was very interesting. That one stuck with me a lot.
Well, let's move forward to your next near death or near death like experience where you left your body.
Well, there's two. One was a surgery that I had. I was in my early 20s, and I had a C-section. And what ended up happening there was they anesthetized me, put me under, but during the surgery, I could feel myself waking up. I could feel the pain of the incision. I could feel and hear the talking around me. And because of that, again, I remember having this conversation, it felt like with God, saying, I want my child to live. I knew it was a daughter, but I don't want to be here anymore. And it was like, no, you're going back. And I couldn't move. I couldn't say anything. There was no way to let anybody know that I was feeling it. But I guess they put a paralytic in when they anesthetize you, so you don't move around and jump. But it wasn't allowing me to stay physically present. So there was this sense that I was just no longer there and trying to leave. And it just, the when I came to, I was disappointed that I was still alive. I couldn't believe I'd been sent back, is kind of how it felt. So again, not super groovy and cool, but definitely impactful.
Did you get any new abilities from that?
Yeah. It's interesting. I developed a real sense of, I guess, what I would call well, it's Clare Cognizance, and there's also I think it's called Clare Kinesthetic or Clare Kinesthesia, a a real intense body awareness. And I would say the coolest thing that happened is not too long after that, I was given a set of golf clubs for my birthday, which I didn't want, and golf lessons, which I wasn't interested in. I had no desire to play golf, but my husband did. And so for 6 weeks, I took lessons. And at the end of it, last day, there was, the gift of being able to play on a par 3 course. I was terrified, very in my head about it. We'd never played. And I remember lining up after everybody else in the foursome went, 2 people I didn't know and my husband. I do all the things I was told to do, and I'm getting myself all lined up, and I go to swing, and I hear this cough, and I thankfully hadn't really done yet. And they're like, the hole's over there. I'd lined up apparently to the second hole. So what ended up happening is I was like, everything I've been taught went out the window. And I heard, um, just trust yourself and keep your head down. So I just stuck the ball back down and, kind of turned and oriented myself. And I just swung and I didn't pick my head up, followed through. And when I look up, these 3 guys are standing there with their mouths open. And I'm like, so where'd it go? And they went, in the hole. I was like, really? First time I've ever played real golf, first time ever, it went in the hole. And from that point on, I seemed to have this real sense of knowing where to be physically, sometimes at the right moment. I couldn't control it. Over time, I've kind of learned how to use that. But at the time, it was amazing. And then it started showing up in things like having amazing parking karma, like 90 some percent of the time. If I'm given notice, if I'm a passenger or if it's just me driving, I've taken pictures much of my life about this, I'll end up at the spot next to the handicap spot. It didn't matter whether it was the airport, the mall at Christmas, a concert, the grocery store. It just happened. And so that was one of the first things I started kind of teaching others how to do, just because it was fun. And it kind of goes on from there. But
Well, how do you teach people how to do that? Can you give us some tips?
yeah, it's actually kind of fun. First of all, I had to logic myself into it. And I decided at some point that the reason this must be happening is there's more turnover in the front. So I had to give my brain something to work with. It takes less time to leave the mall, the airport, the concert, get into your car and go. So if, it actually happened at college a lot. I would always be late to class. And there shouldn't be any spots at all, but there's usually a straggler. And I just would kind of feel which aisle it would be in, trust that it would be there, and head directly there. And oftentimes, just as I was coming down, somebody would be pulling right out. And I look around, there's nothing else going on. So I started kind of sharing that with people, and started happening more for them too. So getting the mind to buy into it, trusting that, there is this kinesthetic sense that we can feel energy moving, and to trust your gut is basically the way I would say it. And to visualize, if you've been there before, if you know where, the entrances are, to kind of see it in your mind's eye and then feel internally where to go to. And it starts occurring more and more often.
At what point after your NDEs did you become psychic?
Psychic is kind of a funny word. I would say that these are abilities or senses that we all have. And some of the energy practices that I've learned, and techniques, modalities, I guess is a better word, they're referred to as the subtle senses. So every physical sense has a subtle sense, and that's also known as the clair senses. So, if you have a physical sense of sight, then there's also, a subtle sense of sight, which will show up as clairvoyance. One of the stronger ones for me has been, hearing in the beginning, and then a subtle sense of hearing, and that would be clairaudience. So each one of those kind of turned on, I think, over time, but just with any kind of ability or skill, some of us are more visually oriented, some of us are better with auditory. I think we all have them in varying degrees. And then when you start paying attention to them and understanding that you can work with them, you can develop them. So that started for me. Again, it was probably around college. I had another experience I forgot about. I had an accident on a bicycle, and I was testing out this bike first day of school and came down this hill going to Sac State, and it was on the river, and there were no brakes. And I come careening down and hit this pylon and flipped over multiple times and landed on a chain and then hit my head and was completely knocked out. The gift from that, I mean, I came to, and usually when you have these things happen, you think somebody's going to be there to help you, but I was late on my way to school, and nobody else was on the bike path at that point. And I wake up and my shoes have been knocked off, my shirt had been cut into my collarbone, and had a huge knot on my head. But after that, I started having this parking karma at school, as well as other like things like gifts that were around like winning things, um, entering contests and knowing I would win and using that same sense of knowing. I think on my 21st birthday, I started winning like radio contests all the time, the call in stuff. And I really wanted to win this trip that was a flight to San Francisco to go see Yes on my 21st birthday. And so I just knew I was going to win. And just by the knowing of it, I kept getting these entries over and over and over again. And I absolutely won. I wasn't the least bit surprised. And so it was like, well, if I can do it with that, and if I can do it with parking, what else can I do it with? And I started having um, I think it's clairaudience, but it's also claircognizance, where you just know things. And again, I was in school and I was taking a pre-calculus in college, and I am not known to be a math whiz whatsoever, and was failing the course miserably. And I'd studied for the midterm and got an F. And I thought, that's the first time I'd ever stayed up all night. I could have done all kinds of things and gotten an F. So I decided I wasn't doing that anymore. So come to the final, and there were only 2 tests. I studied a reasonable amount, decided I knew nothing about pre-calculus, was never going to take this kind of stuff again. But I went in there, and I happened to be sitting right behind the smartest guy in the class. I wasn't a cheater. I didn't do any of that kind of stuff. But I just decided I'm just going to wing it and trust my gut and just pick letters. So the teacher came up. We had a 2-part test, and he came and knocked on my desk. He'd put the scores up on the board. He was grading on a curve, and he said, "Where do you think you are in this?" And I was like, pick something around the 60% mark, which I thought was being really generous. He goes, "I need to see you after this." And I was like, "What?" And so he brings me back into his office, and he says, "You got the highest score in the class." And I was like, "I did?" I couldn't even believe that it was possible. He said, "If you gotten one wrong," he said, "I'd have to accuse you of cheating, because the guy in front of you, who we all knew to be the smartest guy in the class, he had gotten one wrong." And he's like, "There's no way, that you could have done that." And he says, "I'll give you an A if you promise to go on." And I was like, "I can't promise that," but it was very interesting to me, because from that point on, I started realizing that I was having this ability to, I feel I was almost, I want to say channeling, but almost eavesdropping in a way, that the field of energy I was in was also encompassing his. We were kind of overlapping, and somehow I was pulling off on his intuitive knowledge. And I've had that happen over and over again in a variety of situations. So, um, same thing happened when I took my real estate exam. I was out of there first, and I just knew. So I was able to start pulling in the information. And sometimes I would hear if somebody asked me a question that we know, um, I would almost hear them think the answer and just pop off, and it would be right. So that was kind of fun.
That is cool. Do you think the key to all this is just to trust your intuition and believe that there are no coincidences?
Well, since then, I've realized that there's a combination of things that happen. Um, It is trusting your gut, your intuition. However, it's easier to do that in situations that don't really matter that much, to wait until, you're taking a test, or in a situation where you need to know which lane to get into, and then suddenly there's an accident in the next lane, that's a little harder to do. So doing it with things like parking karma, making it a game, or finding things, that's another fun one. When I was in school early on, they used to hide um, robin's eggs around Easter, around the classroom, and kind of send you out to try and find it. And basically, they, kids would say you're hot or you're cold if you're getting close or not. But I would feel kind of where it was, and it was so much fun. So then finding things. Another great one is going to festivals and fairs, and there's a thing called the cakewalk. I know not everybody today knows what it is, but there's no skill involved in the cakewalk. And basically, you buy your ticket. They've got a circle with numbers on the floor, kind of like musical chairs, but you just walk around from number to number. They stop the music, then they draw a number out of a jar or a bowl. If you're standing on that number, you win. And there was an instance where I was good at the cakewalk. I used to tell people I could win at least one cake. So there was a harvest fair up in a town close to where I was living, and I had several children at the time, 5 of them actually. And I'm like, let's go win the cakewalk. Like, this can't happen. So they saw me do it. And so I said, we're not leaving until you all win a cake. Within an hour and a half, we walk out like, all these cakes. So doing it in fun ways, or looking for seashells on the beach. There's no monetary incentive. There's a place called Sand Dollar Beach, and we would go there, and I'd start finding, broken sand dollars and big sand dollars. And then the other kids would start finding sand dollars. And I had this one daughter who had no trust in her intuition whatsoever. She's like, I'm not finding them. And this time I'm finding tiny baby sand dollars whole, and I'm like, we're not leaving until you find a sand dollar. So finally, we walk, it felt like a couple miles. We turn around, come back, and she finds her first broken one. And I'm like, see? And then I said, now look for a whole one. It doesn't matter what size, and suddenly she finds a whole one. And then she started finding better ones. So it was kind of clearing the mental fog and the pessimism that this can't happen, I can't do it, it won't happen to me, seeing everybody else do it instead of letting it cave in on her. I just, I knew she would. And it's those kinds of instances that really help to make it more likely to occur when something is more important. When you've lost, your wallet or your keys or something really important, and it'll kind of flash in my mind now where it is. And oftentimes it's right there. And there's no way I could logically know that.
I really like that idea of making a game out of it, because to me that raises your energy.
It does. In fact, my sister and I used to play Yahtzee. And, we before the internet, obviously, and we didn't know getting a Yahtzee was kind of an unusual thing. It doesn't really say that, in the instructions. So we used to kind of shake the cup, and before we would roll the die, say what we were going for, whether it was, a straight or a certain set of numbers or a Yahtzee. And oftentimes, it would get to where we were getting like 3 to 5 Yahtzees a game, and then getting so bold about it. And that would be each. I think 5 was the max that I ever saw. But we'd get bold about it and start calling out what they were going to be in. A Yahtzee, this time I'm going to roll 5 sixes. And, you roll and 3 sixes are there. And it's like, yep, it's happening. And I think because we witnessed it happening for each other, even though we were competitive, we really weren't that more fun to see that it happened. And that was another great way to practice.
At some point in your life, you started speaking light language. How did that come about?
Well, there's been a couple other experiences where I had some car accidents. And there was one where I'd been knocked unconscious, and Yan came to, kind of like with the bike accident, thinking that there would be people there, and there weren't. And so I thought the car was on fire, and I had to get myself out of it. And I guess what had happened is there were some witnesses, but everybody had assumed I died and didn't come to my car. And after two of those types of incidences, I started having more awareness that there was something going on in my life that was atypical. Not too many people seem to have the number of near death experiences that I was having, and I was coming out relatively unscathed. I mean, yeah, I'd had some head injuries, but I mean, physically, I should have been all messed up, and twice my car's been totaled. One time, my airbag did not deploy, and I came out with one tiny scratch on my knee and like a redness from where the seatbelt was. But shortly after that, last one, I was really looking at near-death experiences on YouTube, and I was I was already into energy work and had been doing so for probably 10 or 15 years and had developed a real strong sense of intuition. But I started seeing light language channelings on YouTube, and it felt familiar. It felt understandable. I didn't know what was being said, but I could feel the energies from it. And so one time I was driving these long drives in my car, and all of a sudden, I just kind of felt the urge to speak. And the interesting thing about practicing things like light language or other forms of intuition in the car, which I've later found to be true, is that there is a certain state that occurs with the brain where when we're driving, it's kind of an automatic thing. So it's not meditation, but since the brain is on automatic, you kind of know where you're going. It allows kind of a higher sense of awareness to come in and raises the energy field. At least it does for me. And so at first, I was having just spontaneous sounds come out. Later, it came out with hand gestures. But the light language often sounds very Native American, which I do have Native American ancestry in my family, fairly strong, a few generations back. My grandfather was Native American, but I feel like it was this familiarity, and there's this sense of peace and joy that came with it. And I would say maybe the fifth time, between a week and 2 weeks, it started morphing. I could hear like a difference in language, and I was a speech pathology and audiology major in college. So language was always extremely interesting to me, and communication and how we communicate, and semantics and syntax and how we string everything together, the body gestures. So the later on, I would be outdoors in nature. I would meditate, but oftentimes just walking in nature and noticing, and I would feel it's almost like a bubbling up. I felt like from the heart, since I was alone, I would start speaking, and then my hands started moving. And I had been a Polynesian and Tahitian dancer when I was very young, and had the opportunity to perform in a troupe. I don't know how good I was, but I think doing that, which were essentially mudras, and then I studied sign language quite a bit in college, although I never spoke it. I didn't really utilize it. Suddenly, these signs and hand gestures started coming out in conjunction with the movements. So I played around with it a bit, and I filmed just a few videos. They're not spectacular by any means, although I found them very interesting because I would know it was going to happen. I would spend a day or two, or sometimes a week, kind of raising my vibration in a variety of ways. And sometimes on what I would call auspicious days, like 11/11, or on a winter solstice, or another big one would be Lionsgate, which I really wasn't aware of the energetics behind that stuff at the time, because I really hadn't studied astrology. I just knew that something was coming, and it would just come out, and it would come out in one take. And then I started using it with clients on a one-on-one basis. And some found it to be healing, some found it to be like an adjunct in addition to the services I was always providing with energy work, and in a deeper and more meaningful way. Some describe seeing colors afterwards or having certain issues kind of dwindle away. So I knew that sound healing was important, but I didn't know why. And since then, it's just become a much greater focus.
Do you have the ability to see worldwide events? And if so, do you see anything coming in the near future?
I have, and I do. Um, I started getting a sense um, for the pandemic. Very interesting. I had just returned from a month-long meditation and yoga retreat up at Ananda Village in California, and I'd only discovered the autobiography of a yogi like a month before going and doing their karma yoga program. And I stayed there for a month and started having all of these really intense experiences that I'd never had before. And I'd seen some things happen to me that I had read about in Autobiography of a Yogi, which I found mind blowing because I managed to live most of my life and even become a yoga instructor without knowing who he was. So upon returning back, this was October of 2019, I started having all these urges to do certain things I'd never really done before. Learning how to play music. I started with things like the ukulele, and I had a fascination with the handpan and some other instruments. And so I started that and painting. And in the painting aspect of it, I needed to get supplies, but I wasn't taught. I'd never done these things before. I was just watching a lot of YouTube videos and kind of I felt guided to certain activities. So, kind of speed this up, I got really into the idea of making resin projects. And I wanted to make orgone generators. They were energetic tools. I was really fascinated by tools that help to enhance our energy. And in the doing of it, it became imperative that I get face masks to get masks that I would be able to utilize in the preparation of this stuff. And what was interesting is where I lived, we really didn't have a great mail delivery garbage service or even Amazon coming on some of these rural roads. So I was trying to find supplies and source them through local means. And I had managed to get a collection of masks, painting masks, some of the kind we ended up using in the pandemic and some of the more intense ones. And within, I want to say a month, that's when COVID started showing up. And all of a sudden it was like, don't buy face masks. Well, you couldn't get them hardly in my town anyway, but I had a collection of them. And I was like, well, that's really interesting. And almost as soon as COVID hit, and I got it right in the beginning, and I'd had it for a long time. I think it came a lot sooner than they said. Um, I I'd lost my taste and smell before we went into lockdown, but I had a collection of things and supplies that ultimately we ended up needing because we couldn't have gotten them any other way. So I started noticing that. It was that pattern recognition that kind of came in after I got shocked when I was 4. I started noticing these patterns in society, and I would walk into a store and just suddenly know where to go, and I would find things. And this is another great tool for intuition development is I had to source a lot of thrift stores. And a thrift store is a great place to sense energy. Another place where, there's no guarantee that you're going to find what you want or what you were looking for. You don't even know where it's going to be placed. And I would walk into these thrift stores and I would just get this sense to go to the right. And then I go, well, it feels like I should go right. And at that point, I had started doing this thing called muscle checking or muscle testing for intuition when I was utilizing certain energy modalities with clients. So I started using it, but I couldn't do this stuff and couldn't bring out my pendulum because that would make me look weird. So I started learning how to do it just kind of on the down low. And I go, do I go to the left? No, it's to the right. And then I point at the aisles and just go, okay, the third aisle. And then I'd walk over the third aisle and I'd go to the right. And then I'd be like, well, I don't even know what's here. So something here for me to see. And I'd get a yes. All right. It's on the right side. No, it's on the left. And then I'd point at the shelves and, okay, it's the third shelf. And I just walk down the aisle. And when my fingers would slip, which was my yes, I kind of look and there would be an item, whether it was something to create art, a musical instrument, like this mental list of things that I would like to have, but either A, didn't have the resources, the time, or the finances, or the store availability to get. And these things just started manifesting. So then fast forward, 2021, I started having a sense for weather. I would be on I love to go to the thrift stores. I was never a thrift store shopper before that. Never wanted anybody's stuff. But the great thing is it's also kind of got their energy on it. So it can be a little confusing. So it's a great way to sense what's yours and what's not yours. And I went to a thrift store and I'm guided to this section, kind of like with the camping equipment. And all of a sudden there was this uh, rubber suit that you would wear on a sailboat if you're out, going on some long excursion. I can kind of, and I'd sailed when I was younger. That was another interesting experience. But I was like, it feels like I should get this. The price was like $8, and I googled it, and it was worth like 170. And I'm like, feels like there's going to be rain coming. And that's when we started having all these winter storms. And I remember going with my sister to look at a house she wanted to buy, and there was a creek behind it, and I just met that suit flashed into my eyes, kind of my Clare vision, if you will. And she said, I think I want this one. And I looked at her, I said, no, we're going to have floods this year. And about 6 months later, we started having floods in the place that she was interested in buying. It was right on the area where everything started flooding. And so now family members and friends are starting to see it. And not too long after that, I started getting this sense that something was going to happen to the supply chain or to products. And I started kind of telling my friends and family members, it might be time to start kind of stocking up on some things that long term. So, that was 2021. And slowly over time, it became like you're going to want food, you're going to want a way to get clean water. And then I would be naturally guided to find certain water filtration systems that were very, very good, B, very inexpensive. And I just knew that there was going to be a problem. And then I would see maybe a few months, a year later that, that the water was now really in a bad way with all of the PFAs that have kind of leaked into the majority of water. Now they're saying there's rocket fuel in most of our water as well. And there's no safe level for that. So I was like, okay, food, clothing, water. The next thing that came up for me, and I actually highly recommend this for anybody that doesn't have one, is I kind of started hearing the word Faraday cage. I didn't even know what a Faraday cage was. I'm having to Google this stuff. And I was kind of guided to this company that had backpacks and bags and little things to put your phones and your wallets in to block the EMF energies. And I'm sensitive to energy, but I've never been one that, would get sick if I walked into a store. But now what I realized is I got those things early enough and I just trusted my gut. I wasn't going to, break the bank by getting them. And it just kept coming up. I would see videos, I would see ads. I wasn't talking to anybody about it. So it wasn't my phone overhearing it, but it would show up. So getting some sort of way to isolate your electronics, to restore privacy, to not have people listening in on you all the time, so that you cannot be guided by marketing, but actually trust the messages that are coming. I felt that to be kind of important. And honestly, where I live now, I mean, we don't use Ring cameras. I mean, there's cameras around my community, but having a sense of privacy and being able to control your own energetic environment is really helpful. So then The food stuff came up again, and I can tell you now, I had started getting into seeds, having good quality seeds to be able to grow. I was being guided to garden. Um, and right now, I'm getting a sense that there's some climate things about to happen. Um, Earthquakes have been kind of on and off my radar. And I, again, don't have sites that I specifically look for, but all of a sudden I'll be feeling, it feels like there's going to be an earthquake or something soon. And then all of a sudden it's in my feed somewhere. And I've checked on a few, and I've heard recently that there's some people suggesting that there might be some earthquake activity coming, especially where I live in California. And this was just a few days ago watching it. And the gentleman whose podcast I was watching was suggesting that somewhere between the Bay Area and Eureka, all the way into the Sacramento Central Valley in California, was an area of concern for 6.5 or better. And then he mentioned Yellowstone and Colorado also around, and he showed kind of the fracking areas. And then he mentioned Texas as potentially having one, which they hadn't in a long time, at a 5.0 or better. And within about 2 hours of watching that podcast, and he only posted it that day, there was an earthquake in Texas around 5.0. So I'm learning to trust that a whole lot more. I do sense that there is a strong chance that there will be some sort of event coming, and 2025 really hits hard as for being a time where it's going to get very difficult for people, that it would be a great idea right now to have a sense of community, to have a way to source things other than Amazon, to start collectively sharing things. I know on Facebook they have groups like free resources. You give things away, and by doing that, people kind of notice. And it's just this: if you're not using it, why not give it to somebody rather than selling it? To live in a community, or to get to know your neighbors well, and to establish some community gardens, or to offer to help somebody in theirs, just to kind of establish that sense of cooperation and collective awareness that we do best when we share things, that there is enough for everybody if no one hoards. And hoarding, in a lot of ways, is very similar in energy, in my experience, working with people, to not having anything at all, to lack consciousness. Hoarding consciousness is lack consciousness. It's just saying, I don't trust in the universe. I don't trust in a powered rate of myself. There isn't going to be enough for everyone. And since I can get enough, I'm going to hoard more than I need. And that actually shuts down the energy as well. So those are some of the big ones.
After watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you open to that?
Yes, I am.
What's the best way to contact you?
My email would be Deborah Wold, WOLD, at proton.me. I also have a YouTube channel, which I will be posting things. Intuition development is one of the things I really enjoy, helping other people to connect with their intuition and own abilities to innately heal themselves with their own inner awareness, and then being able to suggest tools and whatnot that would be useful. I do energetic healings, and I post stuff now for free. I will do more. I just kind of have been working with people one-on-one, but that type of thing. I have a Deborah Wold YouTube channel that they could also contact me at.
Do you have a website?
I don't right now. I will probably get that up, but I wasn't really sharing this necessarily to build a business. It's just, it feels like it's time to kind of share the wealth and what I have learned through some of my traumatic experiences, which I have to reframe, because I think the gift of the challenges and the traumas and wounds that we and I personally have received is the opportunity to learn and grow in a new way, utilizing those psychic senses, the Clare senses, the intuitive situations that occur, and being able to connect with your higher self and other divine beings. So I will probably get that going, and who knows, there could be a book in it. But again, that's not the point. I really want to see us all do well collectively, because my experience, when one person raises their consciousness and their awareness, the entire world raises. And if we all are kind of grouped into that and helping each other, then it will make the world a better place, and we'll get through the rougher times.
Before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
Yes. Actually, I could do this with light language. Well, here. This transmission is to help any of those who are open to receiving it to connect to their own intuition and to begin to trust the synchronicities and the oddities of life with a sense of curiosity instead of a sense of fear. And by keeping that vibration high, it's learning to surf the waves of energy in a way that builds momentum and power for you to be able to utilize in your own life, and to apply in a way that helps others who are affected by you as well. Nietra pushkanai temotwana, halata notes to kutera matinka, proneto robusta, protum giniata, torangita shwotum notera, hantaronitna shwa, tutkitu blatena dosh komonyanata. Be well, trust that you're always supported, know that you have more guidance that you have ever known, watch your thoughts, because they become your reality, and then they affect the reality of others. Be kind.
Deborah, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.